you've got more than 40,000 locations all over the world. How many are actually open at this point?
Globally, about 75 to 80% are open.
And in the United States, the ones that are open, how do they conduct business?
Yeah, it's about 85% in the U.S. For the most part, the ones that are in, as you could imagine, colleges, universities, places like that, malls that are shut down, those are closed. But for the most part, the drive-throughs, inlines, et cetera, are open. Obviously, we don't have in-room dining, but third-party delivery, takeout, that allows the vast majority of our restaurants to stay open in the U.S. and, quite frankly, in a lot of countries around the world.
How do you keep the people who work for you safe? And how do you take that and think about how you're going to keep your customers safe when you can fully reopen again?
Sure. Well, obviously, the thing that's of utmost importance is the safety of our crew, our sandwich artists, and our guests as well. So we're very focused on wellness checks, temperature checks when the crew starts their shifts. We'll have all of our sandwich artists in gloves, all in masks. We'll make sure all of the food, the fresh food, is covered up at all times. And so we just really double down on safety. And I hope when guests come in and pick up food, take out whatever they do, when they see people again in gloves and masks, they'll realize how seriously the industry is taking food safety and coronavirus overall.
Can restaurants like yours operate in a world where we have to social distance for the long run, keep such a space from each other? And how does that change the economics for the restaurant industry if it means ultimately fewer people in a place at the same time?
Yes, well, I think Subway is ideally suited for a couple reasons. One, we're, first of all, a chain of 100% franchised. Unlike a lot of QSR systems, we don't have a lot of multi-unit operators. We have the average franchisee has 2 to 3 restaurants in the United States. So we are the ultimate mom and pop, if you will, and totally woven into the fabric of local communities out there. But because they're smaller and they own just a handful of stores, they're able to watch over them, make sure the crew handles everything properly, to make sure the guests are spaced out appropriately. But then I think, as you know, the restaurant industry, QSR in particular, has gone much more heavily over the past few years to third-party delivery, to takeout, to catering. And so that part of all of our business has grown, and I think it's obviously going to grow even faster in the coming years. So I just think you'll see a bigger shift to those channels than even what you've seen in the past.
John, I'm curious about how you're dealing with costs right now, given the uncertainty that's out there. Advertising, for example, have you cut it significantly? Some have reported that you've cut your budget by as much as 50%.
Yes, we obviously cut our advertising budget, the back half of March and the first couple weeks in April. I didn't think it made a whole lot of sense, nor did our marketing team. And globally, we did pretty much the same. So, yes, we cut back. And now that things are starting to reopen, obviously, Asia's a little bit ahead of us. We've got some markets that are actually even up in Asia, believe it or not, year over year. So we've started to turn the marketing spigot back on, and we'll ramp back up. And certainly by the middle of May, we'll be back to our full marketing weight as we push through the back half of the year.
Wow. Okay. So middle of May is back. Back to what Sarah was asking about. How many of these practices that you're putting in place do you expect to stay with well beyond when the virus is sort of passed?
Well, I think the consumer is going to dictate that for us, and obviously science. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball here. Nobody knows really, will there be a second wave, and what will happen when we hit colder weather come the fall, late fall, early winter. And so I think it's just hard to say. I think we have to go by what science tells us, how the consumer feels, and whatever the industry needs to do. I'm confident we will react that way and ensure that again, guest safety and the safety of our sandwich artists and crews stays of utmost importance.
Sir, there's been a study. This is Jim Cramer. There's been a study that was done out of China, the CDC quotes, which talks about air conditioning pushing droplets from one table to another to another. How are you going to avoid a situation where an air conditioning flow doesn't infect multiple tables from one person who is sick? And how about just demanding that everybody wear a mask who goes into Subway?
Well, that is certainly something that's under consideration. And in certain countries that is being done, whether it's done by law, whether it's done by sort of societal convention. And I think that's something that we are looking at in certain markets. And that's certainly a distinct possibility.
John, I'm wondering how much Subway's leverage to people going to work, having a place of work that they are on their way to or coming from to get lunch in terms of traffic. I just wonder, we can open all the stores we want, but to what degree are we relying on full employment to drive people coming into the restaurants?
Well, actually, sales have been fairly decent for the most part. As I said, places like colleges, universities closed, malls, things like that haven't reopened yet. But again, Subway's the largest restaurant chain in the United States, also the largest restaurant chain in the world. So with over 27,000 outlets in the United States, we're sort of ubiquitous. We're everywhere. And again, when you consider what percentage of the business, even before coronavirus, again, was takeout, was delivery, and things of that nature, we've done relatively well. We've certainly improved a lot over the last few weeks. And I hope that we continue to see that improvement gradually over time. So I'm not so worried. If we had countries like Europe where things are completely shut down, restaurants aren't even allowed to be open, whether it's delivery or takeout, that's a different story. But in most countries like the U.S., I think traffic will continue to improve, and I don't think we need to have the economy back to 100% to have reasonable returns. Again, Subways are much smaller. I think, as you know, we don't have nearly the footprint, so the capital investment's much smaller. The amount of labor in a Subway is much smaller than what you would have in a McDonald's or a Burger King. So therefore, the unit economics are a little more friendly for restaurant footprints of our size, let's say, than some of the larger players. So I actually think we're ideally suited for an environment like this.
Finally, John, I know that most of your franchisees did apply for PPP, the small business relief aid from the government. What do you say? I know you're not a public company, but what do you say to critics who say this money was meant for small businesses that were hanging by a thread? Subway is one of the biggest restaurant chains in the world.
Right. But as I mentioned, we're 100% franchised. Again, unlike a lot of other QSR players that have large, multi-unit operators that have 50, 100, some of them 500, 800, we literally have 10,700 franchisees in the U.S., and on average, they own 2 restaurants apiece. So they are truly the mom and pop that's out there in their community, which is, why we got involved with things like Feeding America, why we support first responders, and they literally need to be a part of that community to survive. So I would actually say we are the ultimate small mom and pop. I don't know of another QSR chain that has as many small 1 or 2 restaurant operators as we have. So PPP and programs like that are vitally important to ensure that we can keep those 27,000 restaurants open.